But sometimes we in them and we forget who we are and whose we are. So I'm just reminding you today, knowing I got a flight, that you got to make sure that you bring that. So you walk in there, man, let me back up on this a little bit. And your soul, man, is something inside. And it's churning. And you like, what's happening? But then you know what's happening because your soul is screaming out and it's saying, I am the number one determinant of the success or failure of my students. See, they're yours. They're yours. They're yours. Do you hear me? They're yours. So you walk in there, man. I am the number one determinant of the success or failure, watch this, y'all, of my, woo, they're yours. Students, they're yours. When you get back, kick some butt. And I'll see you in the winner's circle, celebrating your victory. Let's go, y'all. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Y'all got this, man. Thank you for letting me talk to y'all. Thank you. Woo!
And we are live. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to week 224 of the AP and New Principals Academy. Let me see who we got here, man. We had some folks checked in early, man. We got Sharon Wright in the building in Blandon, Pennsylvania. She said hello to myself and the Queen Kafele. Constance Sherrod is in the building. Said hello to the family from Pearl, Mississippi. AP Patrick Lawrence is in the building. We got, and he's down in sunny Connecticut. Michael Benton, Cincinnati, Ohio. Mia Long, Euless, Texas. Good morning. Grace Castaneda, back in Kyle, Texas. Good morning to you. Takesha High, Virginia. Ronald Pugh, Cedar Hill, Texas. Let's go. Curtis Jackson. That's not 50 Cent, is it? Curtis Jackson in the building. East Cleveland. Man, I had a good time in East Cleveland, man, this week. We're going to talk about it in a minute. We got Marsha Poe out there in San Diego. Probably got some great weather too, Marsha. Lysandra Brackens is in the building, North Carolina. Edgar Ray is in the building, Macon, Georgia. Carol Blanchard is in the building. Carol, she said, I'm here. And she said she loved the look. I think you were probably talking about that video I just showed. John Herricks, Denton, Texas. Tashika Truesdale is in Atlanta. Proud alumni of North Carolina A&T. Yeah, I had a good time with the folks, man. That was a good day. That was a powerful day. Edwin Garcia, he said, hello to the Academy fam here from Jersey, but listening in from PR, Puerto Rico. I hear that. I need to be out there with you. I need a vacation, man. I need a vacation. You see me driving around in that big Dodge Ram 1500 truck, man. I need a vacation. Listen, Sharice Ayers, I see you. St. Paul, Minnesota. Golf RWT is down in Atlanta. Hey, Golf R, make sure you register for that NABC conference, National Alliance of Black School Educators, in November. I'm going to be in the building. Atlanta. John Few, Jacqueline Harriet, Nova Scotia. The queen of the castle, man. The castle. Kimberly Broughton Kafele is in the building. Lisa DeBose Walker is in the building. Marcus Scott IV. Hey, Marcus, man, trust me when I say this, man. You on my list, man. You on my list. I got you. I got you. Right? AD Faison is in the building, elevating education for MLs down in Atlanta. Carol, I said Carol, but she said epic, so I'm going to go ahead with it. Carol Blanchard said epic. I appreciate that. The Chancellor Davis, Vegas, 702. Vanessa Zeskin, I ain't been to Vegas in a minute, man. I gotta get out there, man. I gotta get out there. See some shows, man. If I could stay there 7 days and go to a show all 7 nights, right? Alicia, we got MPA Jaguars. That's Josh Tovar in the building. Alicia Fields out there in Virginia. Man, you know, this Twitter thing is working different, man. I'm liking it. I'm liking it. I'll tell you all about that in a minute. Tabby Daralek is in the building. I'm getting ready to shut it down, y'all. I'm getting ready to shut it down because it's time to get started. I got the big time guest waiting in the wings. I see Dr. Rella Hicks, though, in Augusta. You know I got to shout her out. Carol Blanchard, I forgot you in JA, man. I got to acknowledge that. You in Jamaica. I'll be in Jamaica in October, you know, the birthday week. I'm getting ready to turn that big 64. Y'all saying 64, man, he look young, man. Kafele gonna be 64. I thought he was like 46. Nah, man. I take care of myself, man. We got Bobby Morgan in the building. That's my man. I met Bobby when I saw my guest Dr. Gabbadon out there in what school were we at that day, man? I'm tired. I'm sleep deprived, y'all. We were in Baltimore. I know that, right? I'm sleep deprived. And I'm gonna end it on this one. We got Principal Tammy Taylor in the building. Make sure you watch her every Saturday with Sheikah Houston, Dr. Sheikah Houston, 10:30, Sean Hurt at 10 o'clock, and then myself at 10:55, and then Josh Tovar and Dr. Morena. Hey, Doc, hey, Josh, you gotta let us know her first name one day. That's on Sunday nights at 5 Eastern, the Fantastic Four. But we coming together on this platform next week, but we will talk about that later. But next week, the Fantastic Four, we talking back to school. All of us going to be right here on this screen. But let me end it with Dr. McKeever Jeter and Stacey Joy, man. I see both of y'all, man. And Dr. Donna Ford. I ain't going nowhere without mentioning Dr. Donna Ford in the building. So Dr. McKeever Jeter is in the building. Stacey Joy, who's going to be my guest in about 2 weeks, I think, is in the building. And then we got the GOAT. That's right, I said it, the GOAT, greatest of all time. We talk about gifted education. There's nobody else. If anything you want to know, man, I can't put my hand on that book because I got all this stuff in front of it. But anything you want to know about gifted education, and then you sprinkle in that whole equity and diversity and inclusion piece along with it. Dr. Donna Ford, who's been a guest on here, is the GOAT, the undisputed GOAT, greatest of all time. And she is here watching from Twitter. We're going to end it right there. If you don't know Dr. Donna Ford, you better ask somebody. Like people say, Google me, right? So just Google her, Dr. Donna Ford. And anything you need to know about gifted education, she is the guru, right? Just go and look her up. And everything you need is there. And then you need some equity, you need some diversity, you need some inclusion mixed in there. She got you. She got you. And she ain't paying me a dime to say this. I'm saying it because I know that's who she is, right? Enough said, y'all. Make sure you go back, scroll back and check out the broadcast that I did with Dr. Ford about a year ago, right? It's powerful. All right, here we go. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Greetings. Welcome to week 224 of the AP and New Principals Academy. Hey, man, listen. I don't know about y'all, man. I don't know what kind of week you had. I can tell you what kind of week I had. Mine started with a flight cancellation when I was a keynote speaker on Monday, right? And then we traveled. I'll talk about that in a little while. But I'm sleep deprived. I'm food deprived. I'm a whole lot of things deprived, but let me tell you this: what I'm not deprived. I ain't deprived of no fire. I'm on fire. Woo! I ain't deprived of that, baby. That's in me. long as I can speak, that fire is there, right? So with that said, man, welcome to everybody, man. Let me just shout out first Cherokee County Schools in South Carolina. If there's any of you on right now, I apologize, man. Listen, I tried and tried and tried to be there. It is not like me not to show up. Because when I can't get somewhere, I just drive. I'll do 12 hours driving. People know that. I'll do 10, 12 hours driving and show up unshowered. Yeah, I put it out there, unshowered, same clothes as yesterday, same underwear as yesterday, but I'm in the building because of commitment. So I was gonna make it's a 10-hour drive to it was a 14. I don't know what it was. It was 14 hours. It was something. I know it was some crazy number. I was gonna do it, but no rental car agency had a car in Newark. None of them. So I could, because everybody with them canceled flights on Sunday night, everybody took all the cars up. So I couldn't drive my car, which is my wife's car, and leave it in South Carolina, right? So I couldn't make it, but I'll be back. Shout out to Cherokee County Schools. Shout out to North Carolina A&T State University. As far as the new teachers, I had an opportunity to spend all morning with them, man. They did 1 year. They were coming out of industry. They weren't teachers that went through pre-service. They came out of industry. And the brother was asked to go down and talk to him, man. Oh, man, what a day. Just being on that campus, the Greensboro 4. Go to my Facebook page and check out the pic I took under the statue of the Greensboro 4. Also, go and check out the picture at the museum, Woolworths, where on February 1st, 1960, those 4 young men, college students from North Carolina A&T, said, we ain't getting up, right? We sitting right here. Right, you're gonna serve us, and that began the sit-in movement. Right, so go make sure you check out my Facebook page. Then I drove on over to High Point University and talked to aspiring assistant principals. You know I was in my element there. Aspiring assistant principals, man. What an afternoon we had. So that was 2 in 1 day that day, man. Great day. Then flew on out to Cleveland. Went to East Cleveland, baby. The National Heritage Academy schools, the Ohio schools. Dr. Charlena Hunt, who's the director of quality schools, man. It was just had a great time with them all morning long. Then flew on out to California to El Centro Elementary School District, man. It was 115 degrees, man. Oh my God. Just walking outside, you like, oh man, is this okay for human beings? It was just blazing out there. And you know, I couldn't get they couldn't give me a fly car. I had to drive this big white Dodge Ram 1500. Oh my God, I was eye level with the tractor trailers. I don't know anything about driving a vehicle like that. And I had to drive it for 2 days because then I had to drive the Pleasant Valley School District in Camarillo, California. That's a 4-hour drive in that big monster. I'm like, oh my God, but I did it. Then drove on back to LAX and flew home, and here I am. So shout out to all of them. If any of you are on here, from El Centro, from Pleasant Valley, from National Heritage Academies, from NC State U, from High Point, Cherokee. Shout out to all of y'all. Thanks for being here. Hey, y'all, welcome to the First Timers. But if this is, in fact, your first time, that means you've missed 223 sessions. 223. You know, I take a lot of pride in this platform, man. You missing something really, really powerful. Not to mention Create and Educate with Sheikah Houston, Tammy Taylor, Sean Hurt, Josh Tovar, and Dr. Moreno, right? It's just powerful stuff. So you got to make sure you tune in. So go to my YouTube channel at AP and New Principals Academy later on and just binge watch the 223 sessions that you missed. I promise you there's no session that you're going to say this was a disappointment. They're just powerful stuff. They're used in college classrooms, right? They're used all over the place, man. I guess I lose business over them because so many professors use them in class, but I'm good with that, right? God gonna bless me regardless, right? So I'm good with that, right? So make sure that you subscribe to the channel, right? Again, subscribe to the channel. One more time, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Secondly, you may notice I'm back on Facebook. I'm back on X, Twitter. I'm back on LinkedIn because some of y'all, man, y'all ain't want to make that switch, man. And I said, I ain't fighting with you. I ain't fighting with y'all. Listen, let me look in this camera. I ain't fighting with you. You didn't want to make the switch? I said, okay, well, I'll acquiesce. Because see, I'm in the business of ensuring that America's schools are functioning well. So I can't say I'm gonna force you to come to YouTube. I'm gonna do. Sheikah says something like this morning. I caught it, Sheikah. I heard you. You said something. I'm gonna paraphrase you. I said, I'm gonna just let you watch on the platform that you like most, right? You said something like that, Sheik, about your own platform when the two of you came back from recording. So I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna use the same line. I just want you all to tune in on the platform that you are most comfortable with, right? So despite my objectives for YouTube, forget about it, right? It's we here. Facebook on the Principal Kafele page, not the other one. Twitter on Principal Kafele, LinkedIn at Principal Kafele. So now share, repost, retweet, whatever they call it these days, but also hit the like button. That matters. That like button matters more than the share, because the like button is what activates the algorithm. So do me a favor, y'all, hit that like button, hit that like button. And by the way, my numbers are a lot better than they were last week when I was solely YouTube. I'm back happy again. I think I'm smiling a little bit more this week than I was last week. I told never mind, I ain't gonna tell y'all this. That's some things ain't meant for company. So now let's go. My monologue, real quick. My guest today, Dr. Andrea Terrero Gabbadon, wrote this book. It is an important book. Support and Retain Educators of Color, 6 Principles for Culturally Affirming Leadership. We're gonna talk, this is where we're going today. But in the interim, I want you to go to Amazon, like go there right now, or go to ascd.org, right? Or barnesandnoble.com. Get yourself a copy. If you find that you don't have you don't have the required the requisite number of teachers of color relative to the number or percentage of students who are of color, you need this, right? So get yourself this book and get it now. Don't wait for later, because you might forget. Right. So let's take it right up to number 1 on Amazon, and whatever categories it's in. I need to check that out. But let's do that. But my monologue ties into it. The educators of color who are looking for the educators of color who you are looking for are often sitting in the desk of your students, right? Sitting in those chairs. Let me just say this, and then we're gonna bring my guest up here. A lot of times you hear people talking about, man, where are we going to find teachers of color? Where are we going to find Black teachers? Where are we going to find Latino teachers? Where are we going to find Black male teachers, with Black men ranging from 1.2% up to 1.9% of the total teaching force in America? Where are the men? And here's my answer. If you have Black children in your school, they're sitting in your classrooms. That's where they are. Now, that's not the immediate fix, but everything can't be immediate. Sometimes we got to have long-term goals, right? Long-range goals. So that kindergartner, that schooler, that kindergarten, that first grader, second grader, third grader, fifth grader, seventh grader, ninth grader, 12th grader that's sitting in your classrooms is your future teacher. But the question is, have you tapped into that youngster? That's the question. Have you tapped into that youngster at a very young age to spark an interest? Or have you asked the students in your school if they have an interest? I went on my PA one day when I became a high school teacher, my public address system, my intercom, if you will. And I said, excuse the interruption. If there's any students, let me get this here, this is the mic, right? If there are any students in this building who have had just a fleeting thought of becoming a teacher one day, I need you to report to my office right now. I know my teachers weren't happy about that, because I didn't pre-warn them. It's like it popped in my head. I said, I'm going with this, right? I apologize to them later. We were standing room. I had a very large office. We were standing room only, kids out the door. Now, of course, someone could say, they just wanted to get out of class. Nah. I said, let's go up to the cafeteria. We had this meeting. I said, y'all serious? They said, we serious. I said, I'm starting a club. I'm going to lead this club. I'm going to advise this club. This is going to be my club, future teachers, future educators of America. I said, we're going to meet after school. Who's down with me? They said they were. 3/4 of them kids came faithfully to my meetings. I took them to conferences. I took them to places where I was the speaker on education. I mean, A lot of them are teachers now. 2 of them went to the Black Educators Rock Conference 2 weeks ago in July. I couldn't get down there for flight issues, but they were there. But it started when they were in high school with me. Now they teachers. They might be on the thread right now. I'm saying to you, your future teachers, educators of color are sitting in your classrooms. But the question I'm asking you, are you tapping into them? Or you just letting them move on out of the school, graduate from the school. You never had a conversation, and then life happened, life unfolded, or they started lifing, and now they lost their focus on education, and they're doing something else because you didn't breathe that education life into them. That matters. Enough said. I'm not the guest today. I got a guest. That's just my monologue. Hey, somebody, do me a favor. Hit the share button. Hit the repost button, hit the retweet button, hit the whatever button makes this thing known to more people, and hit the like button. Let's say you dislike it. Like it anyway. If you dislike it, you on here watching me, though. So it got to be something you like it. Because if you dislike it, but you on here watching me, then you got issues, right? So if you on here, hit that like button anyway, right? So that we can make sure that the optimal number of people are on here watching. With that said, man, I got the big time guest up here. Let me bring her on up here. I got the good Dr. Andrea Terrero Gabbadon is in the building, the author of Support and Retain Educators of Color. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you for the invitation. I'm inspired. You started the fire this morning. I'm feeling it over here.
I appreciate you. And I forgot to tell you off mic that any of my guests that have that doctorate, that's what I call you. I can't do Andrea today because you work too hard. But it's a dual reason. The other reason, I see you, Yolanda McKinney, you checking in late this morning, I see. But the other reason is because there are folks out here, I'm sure, I'm just assuming now, that started the process and then life got in the way. And now they're not working on the degree. So by me saying doctor, it reminds them, oh, I got work to do, right? So there we are. I see you. My Aunt Judy Matthews is in the building, so I got to shout her out. I see you. Tell Arnold get on here too. Let Dr. Gabbadon see what I just did? Let Dr. Gabbadon school him on some things, even though he's not in the education space, man. Here we go. Let me read this bio. She sent me the short one so we can get through it quickly. Dr. Andrea Terrero Gabbadon. She, her. It's a long time since I took Spanish. Is it pronounced Ella or Elia?
Ella.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. So when I was in high school and I was saying Ella all them years, ain't no teacher correct me. Right? None. See, when I got older and I saw it, double L's, that can't be Ella. Right? So anyway, equips leaders and organizations to support and retain a diverse employee workforce through culturally affirming leadership, strategic improvement of working conditions, and racial climate and targeted professional development. That's a lot, y'all. That's a lot. An executive leadership coach, speaker, and author, Dr. Gabbadon's work touches on culturally responsive and sustaining education, school racial climate, and educator diversity. Previously, she served as a high school teacher leader, instructional coach, assistant principal, director of curriculum, and instruction in both a traditional public and charter school. Dr. Gabbadon has also served as a professor and teacher educator at several institutions of higher education, including Temple University and Swarthmore College. She is also the author of Support and Retain Educators of Color, subtitle 6 Principles for Culturally Affirming Leadership, in publication with the Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development, ASCD, as well as ASCD faculty member. And you all know that that's there for my sister in the publishing business because I am an ASCD author. In fact, I forgot to show you, man. Look, I forgot to put these on the screen real quick. The Assistant Principal 50, the Assistant Principal Identity, the Aspiring Principal 50. Principal 50 is my school, a better school because I lead it. And coming in December, what is my value instructionally to the teachers that I supervise? I don't normally do that when my guest is up, but I forgot to do it. Here we go, y'all. I'm real sick. Hey, somebody hit that share, hit that retweet, hit that like button. Hey, Doc. I ask every guest. We've had a lot of guests on here, and I ask everyone the same opening question. There's your totality. There's a whole lot to you. I know that, but I wanna just look at a compartment, a fraction of who you are, and that is who you are as an educator. Who, as an educator, is Dr. Andrea? Is Terrero is the correct pronunciation, right? Terrero
Yes.
Gabbadon. Who are you as an educator?
Yeah. I'm someone who cares very deeply for the well-being of others. In addition to, right, all the metrics, the success, all the ways that we quantify what kids are supposed to produce and educators and teachers are supposed to be. But at the end of the day, while I care about outcomes, how are you doing? Are you thriving in the building? Is this a place where you are well? That is at the core who I am as an educator.
You're gonna take me off script already. We ain't even getting anywhere. Let's go deeper with that. Are you well? Like I'm thinking about that principal that's just overwhelmed and inundated with the work. What are you saying with that question?
I mean, for that leader that has a lot on their plate, right? That is balancing everything because they love their kids, they love their community, right? They love the folks that they're working with. We can't continue to pour from an empty cup, right? And so when it's leader to leader, when it's me with principals, me with teacher leaders, whomever, we talk about this idea of pies, right? So P for, are you physically well, right? Are you taking care of your body? So I'm looking at you too, right? Principal Kafele, because you said that you're deprived of hunger, my brother. Like, that's not cool. We got to take care of our bodies.
Right.
Are you intellectually well, right? Are you taking care of yourself cognitively? Are you reading, but are you also taking time to, be apart from the work? Because you can't have that on your mind 24/7. Are you emotionally well? Are you spiritually well? Right. And so, as I think about not just the book, but even just my work as an educator, I always start every session with some type of calling folks into the space and creating a moment for stillness for folks to do that. Am I well physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually? Because again, if we're not well, that's going to show up in our leadership. We all know that, right, in this space. So it's about creating systems to ensure that we're well so that we can create spaces of healing for others.
You say, man, we just gonna let it flow, whatever happens. You say that the folks on the call and the folks who watch the video, you said we all know that. But I'm gonna challenge that. I don't know that we know that. I think theoretically, because see, obviously when I had the heart attack, I thought I was well, but obviously I was not well. I wasn't well at all, right? It's just that I didn't see signs of not being well, right? So on May 1, I think I'm good. And later on in the day in May 1, I got type 2 diabetes and a heart attack. That doesn't happen like that. I wasn't well, but I thought I was well. I was feeling really good on that stage that night, right? So I'm gonna stay here for a second. Talk to that one. I don't want to talk to him. I want you to talk to him. Talk to that one out there right now. They're on here live right now. I'm looking at their comments. And somebody out here thinks they're very well, but like myself, sleep deprived, diet deprived, social interactions deprived of with people outside of the work. Preach to them for me. I know I'm a little unorthodox, but don't worry about it.
No, it's all right. I mean, I think you brought it up, right? Like, what's the evidence, right? What is coming out of your heart? What's coming out of your leadership? What is I remember I saw you speak, I think it was earlier this spring, and you asked about, what is your leadership impact? And I thought that was so profound. And we can't prescribe what unwellness looks like for other people, but there's this idea of knowing yourself as a leader well enough to understand what those signs, what that evidence might be of not being well. And I think particularly for folks that are, and I love the setup that you have here, right? Because you're looking at assistant principals, you're looking at new principals. We're going. I remember back in my career, I was going, doing all the right things, being successful. But at the end of the day, right? Not eating, not sleeping, up at 2 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yeah.
And when we are operating in ways that we're not treating ourselves well, right? Like, this is people-centered work. How can we be people-centered if we're not even subjecting ourselves to humane conditions? We're not even taking the time to rest, right? So I would even encourage folks on this call now, take an afternoon, block out a Sunday or a Saturday, couple of hours, sit with a cup of coffee. Can you even be still, or is your mind racing? Maybe that's the first sign. Maybe that's the first piece of evidence that you're not well, right? Because what we don't want to do, and I talk about this in the book, is we don't want to create or reproduce systems of harm because we're experiencing harm, right? So we have to acknowledge it. We got to be self-aware in order to stop, to interrupt, right, that cycle that we might be reproducing and imposing on others.
This powerful stuff, folks, and I'm just in the intro, and we're not even on topic yet, right? So this is, I mean, we're on topic, but this is I'm in intro mode, right? Powerful stuff. Let somebody know we're here. Tag somebody and let them know they need to be here. So Dr. Gabbadon, you're obviously brilliant, right? You're very smart, and you could have gone in so many different directions with your life, but you chose education. Tell us, what was it about education that you felt that this is where I want to live professionally as opposed to somewhere else?
Yeah. There's so much in that question, right? Because to be honest, I don't think I really realized that I was smart until about 5 years ago. To be really frank, I don't think I understood that I was intelligent, that was a part of my identity. That's who I was created to be, probably until maybe a couple years into my doctoral program. And so when you ask, why did I choose to become an educator? It was because I was in, and I went to some great schools. I was even homeschooled for a part, but for high school, I went to 3 different schools in 4 years. And during that time, I was conditioned by educators, maybe not of all, maybe they didn't mean harm, but I experienced their classroom as a place where I didn't feel smart. And I didn't want other kids who looked like me to experience that. And so the only way that I knew to do something different that I would allow someone else to have a different experience was to be a teacher. And I became a Spanish teacher because at the time that I thought that was the only thing that I was good at in school. I had other interests, but again, I was conditioned to not thinking I was smart enough. And so, I'm grateful for, the good, the bad, whatever it is that's made me resilient in life. I love the work that I do. I love education. But, the road here, as I'm sure folks can attest to, the road for many of us into education has not been necessarily smooth, right? And it's been impacted by the ways that, school has been a place of trauma for many of us.
Yeah. I know I'm quite certain that there are people on here that know me who are saying, you just threw me an alley-oop. And because you know, because you've heard me enough times, that's my story. I look at the peers and I feel that they're smarter than me. I can't compete with them. I don't have what they have. And here I am today, right? So I had to overcome all of that. And, different circumstances, thank you, allowed me to overcome it. But there's so many, and I'm going to use your first name on this one. There's so many Andreas and Barudis who are out there who have the capacity to do anything, but we don't know it. But the question is that I'm not even going to put this onus on the parent, because the parent could be suffering from the same thing. I'm going to put it on the teacher. I'm going to put it on the school. That are we positioning ourselves to tap into that youngster that doesn't see his or her own greatness within them? See, that becomes a question. Of course, I want parent to do that, but sometimes parent needs the same guidance as the youngster in terms of that parent being unaware of the greatness that lies within him and her, right? So great stuff. Let's keep moving here. You know, you've done a lot of things in education, and one of those things. By the way, before I go to that question, to the folks, I'm looking at all the YouTube people, and I appreciate you being on YouTube. But in case you missed my post this week, we're back on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So if that's better for you in terms of being able to tag folks on the thread, being able to engage with folks on the thread as opposed to YouTube, feel free to go on back there, right? But just want to let you know. But I appreciate the YouTube, because that's when I get a couple of dollars and cents when you on that YouTube, right? So keep that in mind. Those of you that say, I want to bless you, Kafele, what's your cash app? No, go to YouTube, and that way I get a couple. I could fill my tank instead of putting in a half tank. Put it that way, because I don't get Shannon Sharp money. I get Bugs Bunny money, right? If that means anything. So anyway, here we go. Somebody said, "Wait, Bugs Bunny? Like, where's that coming from?" So you were an assistant principal.
Yes.
And I, you know, I'm on record. You know, I preach this, that the assistant principalship is the most misunderstood and underutilized position in all of education. I hear that, Yolanda. So here's the thing. I keep saying, I preach it every week, that assistant principal, if you supervise at least one teacher, you have got to be an instructional leader. You have got to be an instructional coach, because because at some point you have to evaluate that teacher. And what is the evaluation based upon? If you're not, you don't see that teacher, you don't see the teacher in action, you're not coaching the teacher, you're not providing feedback to the teacher, etc. So with that said, when you were assistant principal, what did you find your reality to be as it relates to everything I just said?
That supporting the educators in my building was the number one most important, impactful thing I could ever do in my school day. There were meetings, budgets, discipline, be present in the halls, and I'm all about that, right? But at the same time, I had to fight to be in classrooms, but that was the most important battle of my day. To be in a classroom, to be present, to give high quality feedback that is rooted in assets, right? We're not just looking for that got you. Because if we're talking about real instructional leadership, it's about making people feel better, not making people feel like we got them, right? Because that's not what's going to improve instruction. That's not what's going to move the needle with student outcomes. But you got to fight. You have to fight for that. And I would love to say that, my boss or my boss's boss was doing that fight for me. But the reality is, you might have the best intentions, but you have to fight to prioritize the educators in your building. That's the only way, right, that we're actually going to be able to impact student outcomes long term. We're talking about long term, not just at the end of a lesson, at the end of the year. How are our babies going to grow, right, if our educators continue to leave? Yeah. That's the reality.
That's the reality. You wrote this great book, Support and Retain Educators of Color, 6 Principles for Culturally Affirming Leadership. My question to you, I know you because of this work, right? Why are you so passionate about this topic of supporting and retaining educators of color? Why does that matter to you so much?
How much time will we have?
The floor is yours.
I mean, there's so many ways I could respond to that question, right? I'm going to be just short, sweet, to the point, right? I am passionate about that because, number one, right, you read my bio, but what wasn't mentioned there is that I'm a parent, right? I am the parent of 2 beautiful Black and Latino children that are geniuses in their own right, and they deserve to have teachers that look like them and that teachers that want to stay in the profession, right? They will thrive if their educators that are in front of my babies will thrive. To be honest, that's really part of my motivation in my work. It's because of my children. It's because of children in the community that I live in, that I serve, my city. That's really what it's about. The other part of it, right, is and someone in the chat said this, that, you know, after they left the profession, they kind of realized some things about their own story. And the further removed I am from the classroom or from the leadership position that I held, or leadership positions that I've held, I realized we are not giving the high quality support and effort that educators of color require and deserve to stay in the profession. Why is it year after year after year, we continue to look at stats, educators of color are underrepresented, right? 20% of our educated workforce. You mentioned the stat earlier, about 1.3% of the educated workforce are Black men. Despite that underrepresentation, we see educators of color leaving at higher rates. Why is that? That should not be. And so it comes down to, what is their experience in my building? What is experience in their building? You said earlier, I'm in the business of making sure America's schools are functioning well, right? So if I had to like piggyback off of that, like I'm in the business of making sure that America's teachers of color are thriving, that they're in spaces where they're valued, seen, affirmed, and that they want to stay.
Yeah. No, that's solid. You know, let me just say to the folks out there, you gotta create a space, an environment where those particular educators feel affirmed. And those environments, as I'm gonna get into in a different question, that's why I hesitated. I said, let me not get ahead of myself. A lot of those environments, from, you know, just me having the informal conversation in the parking lot or in the hallway or the cafeteria, they can be downright toxic, just around race alone. So but we're going to talk about a lot of that today. So instead of me elaborating on something that's going to be in my questions, let me just go here. I hear a lot of, I talk to a lot of print, like I'll observe an audience, and I'll say, wow, this district has 40%, 50%, 60%, whatever it is, Black youth, Latino youth, but I don't see representation among staff. So I typically will say to the principal, are you, where are the educated, the teachers of color? Why don't you have them? Why is there such a disproportionate number of Black educators here, given the number of students that you have here of color? And the typical response is, we can't find them, or we can't attract them, right? They may feel that they're competing with the major city, because a lot of, you know, because most of my work is in non-major cities, right? So they may struggle with competing with the major cities, so we can't find them or we can't attract them. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think is important to acknowledge is that there's actually more educators of color that are coming into the educator workforce now than there were decades ago, right? And so there's, even being someone who lives in a major city, right? I live in Philadelphia. A lot of my work is based in Philly. There's this concept of like, why don't folks of color want to be educators, right? And if we look at the data, we actually see, right, like the number of Hispanic teachers has increased fivefold over the last 3 decades, right? Number of Asian teachers has tripled, right? We see higher numbers of Black teachers, but at the same time, right, we see that that mass turnover. And I think, you know, part of it is, you know, we are not consciously thinking about the types of working conditions that we're inviting educators of color into. Whereas in the city, right, folks might be able to, you know, find their barbershop, their hair salon, right, find the food that they like, or a neighborhood where they feel comfortable. Okay, maybe our rural and suburban districts might have something a little, you know, a challenge when it comes to that. But at the same time, how are you making sure that your school, your district is ready, right? That there is a connection to an affinity group. There is a coaching program. There is a clear pipeline from classroom teacher to teacher leader program, right? It's not just, oh, well, they're not here, let me throw my hands up. They are. They're actually coming in. Where is your relationship with an HBCU, right? With an MSI, with another type of MSI, right? Like this whole attitude of throwing up our hands, all right, it's hard, but if you really want it, you're going to look for it and establish those relationships, those partnerships, and more importantly, make sure that your district is ready, right? And that's where I'm finding there is a challenge many times, and also folks not knowing how to start. And so it really becomes around well, let's start doing an organizational audit just to see like what is happening in your district, what might be the experiences of an educator of color, and what can we do to make sure that your district is ready and attractive so that someone wants to come in.
Yeah, it's ready, it's attractive for someone. It's like, and you know, I equate that with anything. If we go to certain restaurants, we go to certain stores, we go to certain places, and if it's attractive, and we know that the service is top notch and the product is top notch, then we're gonna gravitate to that particular service, business service, whatever it is. But if on the flip side it doesn't have those qualities, then we're not necessarily going to be attracted to it. So what is it about, and the word I use typically is the brand, that people are going to gravitate to your school? In this case, folks of color that feel that this is an ideal place for me to seek employment, right? It's got to be something it's got to be a magnet there. It brings them to you. And you know, and that's marketing. And that's an important conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so along the same lines, Doc, when I'm on the road, I have opportunity from time to time to have private conversations with teachers, and in this regard, with Black and or Latino teachers, and more specifically, the males. So we're talking to the young men, and I'm thinking about several young men in my mind as I share this with you. They'll say to me, or on social media, they'll send me inboxes. They'll say, Principal Kafele, I'm getting out of this. I got one as recent as 2 days ago. I'm getting out of this business. It's just not fulfilling for me. I don't feel appreciated and respected intellectually. I'm appreciated, respected for who I am relative to discipline, right? So I'm looked upon as this disciplinarian, but my voice does not matter. And I hear this all the time. So therefore, I just don't have an interest in continuing with this career, or at least being in this school. My question to you, if you were doing a training somewhere and one of those young men approached you with what I just said, what might be your response to that individual?
Yeah. I would listen, I would affirm, I would be empathetic, but I would also point someone back to their why. Like, why did you come to this work? Right? Yes, I would listen. I want to understand the challenges. Yes, I understand that being pigeonholed, stereotyped, right? We often create these very tight kind of spaces for educators of color, right? You speak X language, you're now the translator for the building, right? You're now the disciplinarian. You're now going to go work with the hardest kids. You're not. We do that all the time, right? Where we have these race-based assumptions. So I do think that there's this idea of like, are you well? How can I help you? Let me hear you. But how can I also reconnect that educator to their why, to remember why they came into the workforce in the first place? What evidence are they seeing that they're moving in the right direction? How are they walking in their purpose despite the challenge? And then also understanding that there may be other outlets of support that we can connect that educator with. Because what we don't want to do, and I think we do this all too often in education, right? We have these, you know, what's your why? Why are you here? Right? We go to the teacher that's having a challenge and we provide maybe this one-time intervention, but we don't connect them to a pipeline of support that addresses what we talked about earlier in terms of like the need for or the need to be well, you know, physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, right? So with this particular educator, can I connect you to an affinity group, either locally or nationally? Is there a type of professional development opportunity? I'm thinking there's tons of organizations nationwide we can connect folks with. What can we do so that you can be well, so that you can continue to operate out of your why?
Yeah, and I'm with you in terms of going back to that why. It's so important. And there's another piece that I add when I'm having those conversations with these young men, these brothers. I remind them of history to the extent that I can in the short period of time that I have with them. I say that our existence in this country has been one of struggle. So why are you expecting this nice free ride now? The struggle continues. So that struggle, your struggle may not be leading a march in the streets or a rally. Your struggle might be teaching a youngster how to read, right? But if you're discouraged by X, Y, and Z, you can never lose sight of the context of the reality of being a person of color in America. We can never lose sight of that, right? And think that everything is just supposed to be the way we want it to be. We're still in the midst of a war. All you got to do is open up your eyes, and it's clear as the sky is blue that we're still in a battle, right? And it ain't going nowhere, right? So if there's somebody out there right now and you're thinking about throwing in the towel, giving up, quitting, and you don't want anything else to do with education, I want you to remember we're in this thing. We're in this struggle, right? Don't think because enslavement ended in 1865 that the struggle is over, or that segregation ended in 1964 that the struggle is over. The struggle continues, and it manifests in so many different places, right? Enough said. Let me get off the soapbox. You spend a lot of time, Doc, writing about, speaking about culturally affirming leadership. What is culturally affirming leadership? What does that look like?
Yeah. I write about it in the book. I give a nice paragraph, long definition. I'm not going to read that now because I think at the core, it's leadership that is human-centered. It is responsive to the totality of who an educator is. It is, at its core, anti-racist, and it also is in favor of advancing intersectional justice, right? What does this mean? It's not this kind of like, oh, everybody's welcome here, type of feel good way of approaching leadership. It is, I acknowledge, one, that you are a person of value. We have this idea of shared human dignity in common, but because of the history of this country, racism, other forms of discrimination and identity-based harm, I need to ensure that my policies and my practices as a leader address and actively look to do better, right? I think so often we think about schools as just everybody's nice. You just play nice. You don't think about racism. It's all right. Racism doesn't exist. Or maybe we only think about implicit bias when it comes to our students, which we have to, right? That's real. But the same types of vulnerability that comes up because of maybe language discrimination, gender, sexuality, other forms of identity, right? Race. As leaders, we need to acknowledge, confront, and actively think about what are we doing differently to ensure that those forms of harm don't show up in our building.
Yeah, absolutely. I got some spam on here that I just got rid of. So,
I got you. Thank you.
Did you see it?
I did. That's
Okay.
all right.
No, it happens. It happens.
It does.
One of the reasons, if I could deviate for a second, one of the reasons that I wanted to get off of the other platforms is because you can't control that from StreamYard, but YouTube I can, and it came on YouTube, right? So I can get rid of it right away. Whereas on Facebook and Twitter, I got to go to my phone, I got to scroll, I got to search for it, and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, that was one of the reasons. But we good. So I'll just say this for anybody that did not see it. You can imagine there was something horrible just said, and that's the fight I'm talking about. See this? We're in the war, right? So somebody out there knows that we're having this important conversation, and it ruffled feathers, so they decided to be vulgar on this platform. See, we're in this thing, and that's why I want to remind people when, man, this principal is racist, man, this staff is racist, this and that. I mean, I know, I get it, and we talk about mental and emotional health earlier on in the platform, but you can never lose sight that you are in a war. This is a battle, right? It's not as utopian as you may want it to be. It is not, right? Because I take certain positions, I know that I lose a lot of business. I know, just saying what I've said this morning relative to this, if clients are watching, depending on their politics, then I have just lost thousands of dollars. I'm good with that. I'm good with that because I understand the battle that I'm in, right? I understand it, and also understand whose I am. Enough said, y'all. I'm getting ready to preach. Let me go. So let me find where I was. So here we go. Here we go. No, not here we go, because I don't know where I was. Here we go. I know where I am. Hey Doc,
Yep.
there are these schools and school districts where the population, I mean, it's like in most districts that I'm in that are not major cities, but even major cities, but these smaller districts, I would say if there's a Black and Latino population, then we're talking about a town where there's a shifting demographic, right? There's a shift. Let me just make sure that this is kosher. Yeah, it is. So there's a shifting demographic. So when I get there, or when we're planning for it, they'll tell me, they say this district is not what it used to be. This used to be a white district. Now it's heavily Black and brown, or it is rapidly shifting to a Black and brown school community. And then they'll say, or I'll ask the question: has the composition of your staff, meaning teachers and administration, is that shifting as well? And I would say the proverbial 99% of the time they'll say no, right? It's the same staff, it's the same administration, and hence that's our problem, right? So now we've got these youngsters, and sometimes, when they feel very comfortable with me, they'll say to me, "We don't know what to do. We don't know how to make those connections." That's why we call people like yourself to come in to assist us with making those connections. So in that district, as I throw the question at you, where these demographics are not changing, as far as the staff, the building, but the student population, the student demographics are shifting to a more browner, blacker district. If you have that opportunity to have a conversation with that superintendent, what are some of your thoughts within the role of being a culturally affirming leader? What are some of your thoughts that you might share with this superintendent about this district, which in real time is in trouble right now?
Yeah. I think it goes back to this idea of, is your district ready? It's probably not ready, right? You might be looking for the people, you're not successful with the people. That is where you're kind of caught up. We have to look beyond that, right? So when you are recruiting, what are your recruiting practices? Who makes up the recruiting team, right? Who's in HR? What is their eye? What are and I think in terms of questions, I constantly get questions as I'm working with different folks, or for them to reflect and to self-analyze, because I could come into a space and be like, all right, you gotta fix this. And there's a space for that. But at the end of the day, there's so much power in providing opportunities for reflection around one's work, right? Do you believe this is a priority? How is it showing up in your school vision and mission?
Yeah.
How is that showing up then with your HR department and their practices, right? In what ways do we acknowledge, right, that implicit bias is a thing, and we need to uproot that as something that can impact, right, the recruitment and the hiring of educators of color in your building? Even if you have folks that are coming in, right, and applying, but you don't see them accepting positions. Why is that? What data do you have? Are you asking them about why are you not coming, right? Like, there's so many different things, and we have to stop this. I just throw my hands up in the air. I don't know what to do. All right, you have folks that are coming in. Are you talking to them, right, about what can we do? What is your experience here? At the end of the day, every educator that is in the building wants to be able to see themselves in a space. They want to see that they can be successful. They want to see that they'll be well supported. They want to see that they're going to be valued. They want to see that there's opportunities for them to advance in their career. If you don't have educators of color in your building, it's probably because none of that is happening. So we need to think about what are the institutional processes that are in place that are hindering that, and uproot that. Because again, even if you bring, even if you establish a great relationship with an HBCU, right, top producers of amazing educators of color, of amazing Black educators, right, if they can't see themselves in your district, they don't think they can be successful, they don't think that they're valued, they don't think their voice matters, they're going to leave. Right. And so it has to be around, what are your institutional policies? What are your institutional practices? Let's analyze and, again, uproot what's problematic that's underneath the surface.
Yeah. And you mentioned 3 words. You said priority, mission, and vision, right? And what are your priorities, as you're asking, as it relates to the recruitment and retention of educators of color? In what way does your mission reflect that? In what way does your vision reflect that? That's important. And it's so important. If I could scream out to the fam and then you jump, because I know you want to say something. Make sure that your mission, make sure you have one, because most places I go, they don't. So make sure first you have one, and then that has to drive you. As I always say, and I'll say it here, and I'm gonna turn it back over to you. I define, many of you that know my work, I give my own definitions to various different words. That's just what I do. I've been doing it for a long time. In the mission statement, I gave it my own definition. I said the mission is simply who you are and what you're about. Who you are and what you're about. That is my definition. So therefore, if the mission doesn't exist or it's unknown, then if I can flip that, I say who you are and what you're about means you ain't nobody and you ain't about nothing, right? Your school ain't, and I use ain't deliberately, intentionally, your school ain't nobody and your school ain't about nothing, because based on the definition, who you are and what you're about as a school. So if you walk back into a school next week and the mission is either not known or unwritten, and all you are is just a school, you just exist, but you're not about anything. See, and that matters. So then imagine we take this whole idea of increasing the educators of color and make that a priority and embed it within, even if it's a subgrouping of the overall mission statement, that a part of our mission is to ensure that there's representation on our staff of educators of color, right? That's part of your mission. That's part of your vision. That's what you see. And then you put forth the work to make it become your reality. Go ahead. I know you were going to say something.
No, I mean, 100%. I think one easy way, right? Like one clear-cut example. I was working with a district last month. They brought me in to do a PD. And, I've been doing some work, some research, right? Some context on the district. And I know they've been doing a lot of work to diversify their staff, right? But when I pulled up to their central office, I saw a banner, maybe 6 feet wide. And I took time to read the mission, and the mission specifically called out fostering safer spaces, right? And racial diversity for students and for staff. Like, think about the impact, right? When you blow that mission up so that everyone who's coming sees themselves represented, and there is an assurance, right? Or there is because we do things imperfectly, right? As human beings, but I am seen in a different way, and you're calling out my racial identity. You're calling out my gender identity. And you're saying, like, this matters and this is important to you, right? And as I'm walking in the building, I see PDs that are culturally responsive. I see books from, I see fugitive pedagogy behind you, a principal. I see all of this evidence that while they are not as diverse as they could be, they are doing the work to be ready. So when that Black, when that Latino, when that Asian educator pulls up, they're like, I'm seen in this mission, and this is how the mission is actually put into practice through the curriculum, through the types of PD, through even what the leaders in the district office are reading, because they understand that having an educator of color is not a trend, but you are tapping into a rich resource that is impactful for all children.
Yeah, all children.
All children. And I think that's a reality that we also need to tap into, the fact that, right, like, educators of color, yes, they're impactful. There's studies that show that Black children that have Black teachers by the 3rd grade are 13% more likely to enroll in college. If that bumps up to 2 Black teachers, they're more likely to enroll in college by 32%. And that's wonderful, but we also don't show enough attention to the studies that say that students of all racial identities and backgrounds actually prefer a racially diverse educated workforce because they understand that we are part of a larger teaching tradition of excellence, of justice, of care, of rigor. That's who we are as a people. And so it's about, again, that district acknowledging the fullness of that heritage and that tradition and making sure that they're ready to retain us, not just to, have one or two and they're satisfied. No, they're making a commitment to make sure that we want to stay and that we're seen in that space.
Love it. Love it. Hey, somebody, hit that share button, hit that retweet, repost, tag somebody, call somebody, text somebody, hit that like button, hit that like button, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Let them know that Dr. Andrea Terrero Gabbadon is dropping this fire, man. Fire. Let them know. Let them know. Doc, there's an administrator out there. I'm pointing at my camera. Or administrators out there. There's a black administrator, there's a brown administrator in a building somewhere. They may be on the call right now in real time. And they're in a district where they are a racial, ethnic, cultural minority. But they got hired. So they're there. But the dynamics of this given district, because I don't want to paint with a broad brush that they're all the same, but the dynamics of this given district has this leader, this principal or this assistant principal feeling very isolated, very alone, very lonely, very unworthy, very unvalued, if that's a word, I think it is, and thereby very frustrated with being on the job. I don't feel that I can be who I had envisioned I could be when I was working toward getting this position when I was in grad school. So here you are, consultant somewhere, and in this case, in one of these districts. And you have the opportunity to have a conversation with the superintendent. Not that you had a conversation with that teacher, but that principal, but that this is a reality for some principals who are working in school districts where they are racial minorities and they're leading staffs that do not look like them. In your consulting capacity, what conversation might you have with the superintendent about this principal feeling affirmed in the position where there's some dynamics there where, again, this person feels a little isolated?
Which is such a wonderful question. You took me to the superintendent. I want to go to that principal, but let's go to that superintendent.
Feel free.
Yeah, because I think I think so many people on this call, right? Like they see themselves in that picture that you just painted. And I think we want to hold space for folks right now to say, like, we see you. Like, you are not alone.
Yeah.
And like you're doing the work. And you're valuable and you're making such an incredible impact. You might not even know the extent of your reach. And so, hold on and be well. And yes, use those sick days, mental health days, whatever it is. But, at the end of the day, like we want folks to know that they are so valuable in this work and however we can, connect them to resources. Clearly you're one, but other resources as well, just so folks stay encouraged in the work. But in terms of that superintendent, right, it comes down to dollars and cents, right? It comes down to dollars to cents to student outcomes. We know that it is in the best interest of any district to retain their leaders, right? We know that nationwide, we are spending millions of dollars, right? Recruiting and hiring and onboarding new leaders. So it is in the best interest of any superintendent to keep great people. So what systems do you have in place, leader, that prioritize the retention, particularly of underrepresented leaders within your district?
Yeah.
Show me your goals. You have goals around students, English, language arts, and math, and graduation. Like, that's great. What are your retention goals and your retention plan to ensure that you are holding on to your leaders, that you're not just throwing your hands up when they leave, but you have an intentional goal-driven plan with benchmarks in place, with concrete supports, and that you're also being held accountable in a sense by this principal. You're getting data in some way, shape, or form around their experience to let you know what progress you're making with your retention plan. Yeah. Right? We can't say our people matter. We can't say we want to keep good educators in our school and not have a clear quantitative goal around holding on to staff. And just don't say, oh, well, I have one more broadly. You have to disaggregate the data. If only 25, let's say, only 10% of leaders leave, I mean, it's a little high, but if 10%, who's that 10%? And why are they leaving? And if we look at the data and that points to those racially minoritized, right, that one and only Black, Brown, Asian, right, school leader in that district, then you got a problem. And you need to take accountability for that problem and figure out what you're going to do differently. Yeah. Right? You talk to us so brilliant, Principal Kafele, about being held accountable for our student outcomes. Like our superintendent, we have to keep our people, particularly in this age of educator shortage. It is the moral thing to do. It is the ethical thing to do. But when we look at dollars and cents and student outcomes, we have to do something different that is strategic and aligned to the needs of the underrepresented educators in our districts, point blank.
I love it. And I'm glad that Bendu S. James, I'm glad that she wrote what she wrote, because it took my question and made it concrete. So I'm asking you a question about people that I know are out there, but I don't have a person in my head until she made the comment. Many of these administrators are, in fact, very much alone. They're there. They're in these buildings. And I'm thinking about when they're in a building, because the folks, the community out there that says, I don't see race, I don't see culture, ethnicity, they exist too, right? So that could be that superintendent that, we hired this Black principal, but we really don't see him as a Black principal. We just see him as a principal, but he knows he's a Black principal and he knows he's a Black man. And I know that this dynamic in this district is very uncomfortable for me in terms of how I'm being treated, or the lack thereof. So it's so much to talk about there. And I just wanted to kind of throw it out there and have you put your thoughts out there on it, because you and I both know that those folks are in this business. And those are probably the ones who are quickest to leave if there are other opportunities out there for them, right? If they're not, then they got to endure it. And now we got to have the conversation about mental and emotional health, right? That I'm going to a job every day that stresses me out of my mind, right? So, good stuff. So, so right after you said you wanted me to take you to the principal, I'm looking at my notes now because I wasn't looking at them when I read the question. And it says Part A, the superintendent, Part B, the principal, right? So that's what I wanted you to do anyway, speak to both. So you did. Here we go. Support and retain educators of color. 6 principles for culturally affirming leadership. And then you see our guest name, Andrea Terrero Gabbadon. You can get this book right now on Amazon. You can go to Amazon, ASCD.org. You can go to BarnesandNoble.com, but the book is available. Get yourself a copy, because there's more to this whole idea of supporting and retaining educators of color than we have time to talk about today. But with that said, Doc, you have these 6 principles. Mm-hmm. And I spent a lot of time on that 5-hour flight yesterday, just going through, or last night, going through those principles. So I want to let me adjust my screen here, and let's talk a little bit about those principles. We use the time however we use it. Here we go. So you talked about the 6 principles, and let me read the principles to you all, to the fam out there. The principles are acknowledge that educator diversity matters, cultivate reflection and self-awareness, assess and plan for action, commit to sustainable and high impact instructional supports, foster supportive environments for culturally responsive approaches, and finally lead an inclusive community. So what I want to do, I want to go into that first principle. Acknowledge the educator diversity matters. So through my work, I'm very much aware that diversity is non-existent in a lot of parts of America, right? There's a lot of places I go, and in terms of racial diversity, I may be the only Black person within 1,000 miles, right? So it's just not there. Or it may be that the school district, the student population, there is the racial diversity, but it doesn't exist amongst staff, as we talked about before. So how do we get these districts to grasp in a very serious way, based on that principle, that racial diversity really matters in education?
If we are, as schools, in the business of supporting students to be competitive in the global economy, then we have to have a racially diverse educated workforce. Educators of color. Now we're going to speak, just more broadly, right? Because we know that we're not a monolith, right? And I think that's important to kind of surface here. But what the research shows, and what many of us know experientially, educators of color show high expectations, fewer disciplinary referrals, often working in the hardest to staff schools, right? They're cultural bridges, linking schools and communities. They're windows and mirrors for our kids. They are role models, right? And I talked about earlier, even the impact of a Black teacher on a child's ability to roll in college, right? Again, 13%, right? If you have a Black teacher, the study showed, right? If you are a Black student, you have a Black teacher, you are 13% more likely to enroll in college, right? So we see that there are positive academic, socio-emotional, and post-secondary benefits when we have a diverse educated workforce. That is critical. We have to understand it's not just about getting a body in the building, but the importance of having a racially diverse educated workforce and how that has very practical quantitative impacts, again, on all students.
Yeah, it matters. Let's go to this next one. You said principle number 2, cultivate reflection and self-awareness. Yeah. What are you saying?
Yeah. I always quote the great philosopher and poet Lauryn Hill, right? Mm-hmm. One of her songs, she talks about, you can't win if you ain't right within.
That's right.
It's this idea of, if I am not reflective in my practice as a leader, I might be reproducing forms of harm in my building, right? You talked about folks that are colorblind. Like, you may not even realize that you're colorblind in your leadership. So in principle 2, what I ask the reader is this really important reflective question around, like, should I address race and difference in school, or should I avoid it? And we know that if we're colorblind, then we're ignoring, right, the histories, the forms of discrimination, right, that people have experienced in the past as well as in the present. But when we acknowledge difference, right, it's okay. I understand, based on these forms of identity, you're vulnerable to certain types of harm. How can I address that actively in my leadership to ensure, right, that you're not experiencing linguicism, right, or other forms of discrimination? Because those are going to show up in school. School is a microcosm of society. So while, harm in school might look different for educators, harm is still happening. And I include multiple anecdotes around the different forms of harm that teachers experience, right? Teachers of color, that pigeonholing, the ways that implicit bias puts educators of color often in narrow boxes. And again, all leaders, not just white leaders, but leaders of color as well, need to reflect on what assumptions am I operating with as a leader, and in what ways, again, could I be contributing to harm? Or again, interrogating and uprooting my own biases so that, again, my educator is thriving. in this space and not being marginalized merely because of an aspect of their identity. And we also understand that identity, that we have visible identities and we also have invisible identities, right? So we need to also have a really exhaustive understanding of what harm is and how it shows up, and ensure that we're not contributing to identity-based harm in our buildings.
What up? The wife just came down. So I want to stay here. The whole time you were talking, I had this thought. We're talking about cultivate reflection and self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm this superintendent, or I'm this principal, and I have no clue to my bias. In my mind, I don't have bias. I love everybody, right? And we know that this person exists, right? I don't have a prejudiced bone in my body, is the quote, right? So if or any biases within me. So if I'm that leader, I'm that superintendent, and I don't feel that I have these biases, how do I launch a conversation with my administrative team, who obviously supervise staff in the building? How do I launch a conversation that I don't feel is relevant?
Well, you can't,
Yeah.
right? Like in that specific principle, I give different strategies, right, around how to actually engage in this process of self-reflection. And the first thing is you have to interrogate your own bias. We have all been exposed to misinformation, to distorted information that causes us to have assumptions about other people. And sometimes, right, we've also internalized assumptions about people that look like us. So you can't start that conversation with your team if you haven't done the work of interrogating where you are, right? So a good place to start, Harvard Implicit Association Test. It is an imperfect tool, but it is a good tool to help you understand maybe different biases that you might have been exposed to. You have to think about, what has shaped my understandings of other groups? What have I been exposed to? You can also, in my book, I include a lot of stories around like the ways that leadership bias impacts the everyday experiences of teachers of color. I do that not to just share stories, but I do it for a purpose so that people can use those stories as a reflective mirror to say, could these be the experiences of educators of color in my building, right? You can also even just look at the data. All right, you don't have educators of color in your building. How are people talking about kids of color in your building? I guarantee you, the ways that you or folks of color in your building might be talking about kids of color, you're probably going to have similar conversations and assumptions around adults of color. And maybe that's why they're not in your building. We all have to reckon with who we are and the ways in which we have internalized really problematic beliefs about others. And it's not just race. Again, race is the most visible marker. It is critical because of the history of this nation. But I confront educators all the time that are considered less than because English is not their first language and they have an accent.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're constantly experiencing linguicism, which is language discrimination from their leader, where they're being corrected, where they're, being asked, can you repeat that? Oh, I didn't understand you, right? Like we all have to look inside.
Yeah.
And so the book is slated in a way to be very practical, again, including not just, just different strategies that you can use to help unearth what might be some of the biases you've believed.
So stay in there for a little bit longer. When you talked about the children who become the consequence to the adults, either inaction or moving incorrectly, whatever it may be. Let me look at it from this angle. I'm principal. I've got this predominantly non-black and or brown staff, but I've got youngsters who are black and brown. So I'm politically not comfortable engaging my staff in this conversation because it could have consequences for me relative to my job. That's real. How do I navigate that toward being an advocate for those students, yet I'm looking out for the paycheck at the same time? What do you say to that, Lee? I got my own thoughts, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. So you're saying an educator is existing in a system where the political climate is not conducive to increasing the racial diversity. How can they advocate for kids of color still within that context?
How can they advocate for kids knowing that this is an explosive topic for my staff?
Interesting.
Like in other words, I'm leader. I really don't want to touch it because I know the consequences that are going to come my way in a district like that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, I think it comes down in a sense, right, to student outcomes, right? If we say, and there's a game there, right? Like that may not be my real motivation. Again, I think that there's this ethical element to this work, right? I believe in the historic teaching tradition of, Black teachers. I pull from, Jaime Escalante and other amazing educators. So I'm about that tradition. But there's also, again, like the more like the school board answer. And at the end of the day, if you're seeing disparities in your student outcomes, you have to figure out why.
Yeah.
And you cannot. And this is where, when we have this deficit orientation around our kids, we say it's our kids' fault, right? But it's not their fault. How are we, if we are truly responsible for creating conditions where our kids can thrive academically, then we need to look at what's the curriculum, who's the teaching workforce, what are the posters on the walls, what are the books they're reading, right? And so you can frame it in such a way for that school district, right, or that school board that's not about DEI work. And I don't believe this is DEI work. I believe this is justice work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, this is a necessary way that we have to redo our school to address the fact that our kids, many of our kids, are not thriving. So what are we going to do differently? And I think part of that potential solution that could be introduced in that scenario is around diversifying the educator workforce. And you have to look at the research. There's so much research that talks about the positive impacts of educators of color.
Yeah.
So the numbers, if the ethical piece does not sway you, look at the numbers. Look at the impacts.
Absolutely. So here, Chanel Tizano, there, she just took it and made it concrete. I lost my leadership role because I spoke up for my students. That's the question I was asking. See, and but I framed it in a way that, and I'm in a district that is not compatible with the way that I want to approach it. Right, the things I want to say, the advocacy that I want to do, that I want to bring to my students. Right. So, and there's a lot there to say about it. I just wanted to kind of put it in the atmosphere, and to let folks out there know that we know, and you got to keep fighting, right? You got to keep fighting, but you got to move strategically, and when you do it, because it's very easy for you to be, for us, you to be on the outside looking in. Right. So it's all in how we go about doing it. And you got to have that support around you. You got to get that support. That support may not be in a district like it may be, because it's not to say that you can't have white allies, so I don't get that impression either. But so if that support is not there, then you got to seek it somewhere else. But if you're going to fight this thing all alone against the system, that's a tough fight. That's a tough fight. Right. Let's go. Where we at here? Number 3. You said assess and plan for action. What are you saying? Walk us through that.
Yeah. What's your goal? If you believe that educator diversity matters, you believe it's the best interest of students, you're doing that work to really reflect on your rationale, your motivation, right? as a leader for diversifying your educated workforce, then what's the goal, right? What's that retention goal? What's that recruitment goal? Right now, it's the beginning of the school year. Everyone's, thinking about onboarding and coaching, and what is your kind of disaggregated goal that focuses most likely, right, on an underrepresented aspect of your staff to ensure that you're seeing them, that they are successful, that they are valued, and so they stay. And that requires a really in-depth look at what's happening in your organization. And so in that particular principle, I really walk people through looking at their school and vision and mission. How does that convey that educator diversity is a priority? Your leadership culture, like who's on the leadership team? Who has a voice in making decisions? What is that communicating? Also looking at staff dynamics as well as your instructional culture, right? So looking at different parts of your school to see in what ways are they supportive and helping this goal of supporting and retaining educators of color, or are there potentially things in your building that are pushing educators out?
Doc, I noticed after we switched, then two more popped up, right? They lost their job over that topic that we were on a few minutes ago in terms of being that advocate in that district where we were in the minority, but yet fighting for minority students or minoritized students. One of the things, I've never said this on this platform, but I've said it to my wife many times. Let me say this to you all on the fam out here right now. Somehow, some way, I am trying to figure out how to take this Saturday platform and have a weekday discussion via Zoom, right? So in other words, on Saturday, it's myself when I go solo, or myself and my guests, and we're talking and we see your comments. I'm trying to figure out how I get a link to you guys and we go Zoom and we create a safe space. See, I don't want it. If the space is not safe, I don't want it, right? But I'm trying to figure out, I don't know the answer yet, but how do we create a safe space where we can dialogue in the space and not have people that get the link that don't belong in the space, right? That's not easy what I just said. That is very, very complicated to do, because if you can't be safe in the space, then it's not necessary. It's like a waste. It's an exercise in futility. It defeats the whole purpose. But if the space is safe and we can have, like, we could take this conversation and go deep with it, right? Like real deep. I just have to figure out how we can do that. I don't know right now, but when I come up with, because I've been sharing this with my wife for about a year now. So when I come up with it, or if you come up with it, then hit me with an inbox and let me know, how do we bring people in here, keep a safe space, we can have the real deeper conversations about what's really on your heart, where it's not just you in a thread listening to two people, but now you get to interject, but you don't get in trouble as a result of the interjection. See, that's my concern, because that could be a real consequence. But just know that this is what I'm thinking. And if I can come up with it, or you inbox me and you think you got the answer, then hit me up so we can figure out how we could do that. Right? All right, enough there. I just want you to know what I'm thinking. Let's go. So number 4, commit to sustainable. And that, I think that key word is sustainable and high impact. That's the other key word, instructional supports. Walk us through that one.
Yeah. So in my research as well, even in my work consulting with schools and districts, I found that support was often not equitable, right? And so what does that look like? What does that mean, right? There were, again, race-based assumptions, identity-based assumptions. That's the strong teacher. She's always figured it out. She's got this, right? He knows what he's doing, right? His classroom is on lock. I don't have to worry about them. And so resources in terms of coaching, PD, mentorship, we're always going. And without fail, I see this in the research and I see this in my own practice, unfortunately, where they weren't going to the educators of color because of assumptions, right, based around who they were, what they, what they were able to do, the perception, right? Again, of surrounding who they were. And so in this chapter, I talk about, right, the fact that we're not giving educators of color maybe instructional leadership opportunities because, oh, they're a good disciplinarian, their classroom isn't on fire, right? But maybe not supporting them in the ways that they want to grow as an instructional leader. Or perhaps we're not showing actual care for our educators, right? We're not linking them to different types of supports that would be conducive for their growth. And so, at the end of the day, I really argue that we need to reframe support in three ways. One, how are you supporting educators' pedagogical expertise, right? Supporting them as instructional leaders in the classroom, making sure that there's always a pipeline for them to get better and better and better and better. And there's lots of practical ways to do that. That doesn't require the AP to always do that coaching, but rather is a bridge or a connector to other resources. The second form of support is this professional capacity. So, teachers have a lot of things to do. One way to support them is just by taking things off their plate, right? Or showing them a third way to get things done. And the last thing is, in terms of support, personal well-being. Are you creating systems and policies in your building that are humanizing, right? That center the well-being, again, of your educators.
Policies and procedures that are humanizing. That's a whole conversation right there. Right. That's a whole, I'll discipline myself to not go deep and go into it because we'll go in another direction. We have two more principals out there. But before we do, Doc, let the folks know, and let me clear the screen so they can see the spelling of your name. Let the folks know if they want to speak with you further, if they want to follow you on social media, if they want to invite you out to do a training, if they want to invite you out to do a keynote address, how do they get in touch with you?
Yes. So go to my website, atgabbadon.com. I'm also really active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there, Andrea Terrero Gabbadon. Inbox me right through LinkedIn, or you can send me an inquiry directly through my website. And I do it all. I travel anywhere and everywhere folks will have me in terms of providing, leadership consulting, organizational assessments and equity audits. And I also do professional development with leadership teams, as well as district teams. And so happy to support with those actionable strategies that folks want to put in place to diversify their educator workforce.
Love it. Give that website one more time.
atgabbadon, Gabbadon.
All right. So you all know how to reach. Now, we're not done. I just want to make sure that we get that in case anybody has to leave early. All right. The USA-France basketball game's not till 3:30, so we good. All right, here we go. Number 5. Foster supportive environments for culturally responsive approaches. Walk us through that one.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite one, to be honest, because, when we think about the value of educators of color, often it's about our ability to connect with students, right? Our ability to see, first of all, students' assets and understand how we can build on those assets, how we can build on their forms of knowledge, their communities, their languages, right? To support them in the classroom. And what is that? That's culturally relevant instruction, right? Lori Ladson-Billings' work, and as well as other amazing educators. But while we know that educators of color are often associated with these types of culturally responsive approaches, many times once we bring them into our building, we as leaders create policies and practices that don't allow for them to be culturally responsive, right? So let me make it practical. I've worked at a variety of urban schools as an educator, as an administrator, and there was always like a mandated or scripted curriculum. And so what I would observe most often as a teacher, and this is something I tried to correct as a leader, is we would see this amazing educator of color that's able to connect with students in the demo lesson. We bring them in. All right, we saw you connect with students, but now you need to follow this script, right? What that does is that's depriving an educator of their inherent agency as a professional to make the decisions that they know might be beneficial for their students. And I'm not saying don't follow a curriculum. I'm not saying that all curriculum is bad. Some curriculum is not great, but some curriculum is also wonderful. But are we creating organizational structures that allow educators to do what they know is in the best interest of their students, particularly when they have shared backgrounds with their students and they have firsthand knowledge of what can be impactful. Because at the end of the day, we can't expect educators to be robots, right? That's part of this issue we're seeing in the educator workforce. If we're depriving educators of autonomy, we're not treating them like the professionals that they are. So again, I'm encouraging leaders to think about what policies and practices are in place. How do you need to adjust your school environment to ensure that we are upholding educator agency?
That makes a lot of sense to me. You know, I often say that, you know, this, we can call this curriculum, right? It's just a lifeless document. But there's that teacher, and I'll call that person this master teacher. And if I can turn to the side here, the master teacher takes curriculum and goes like this. They breathe life into it. So curriculum is curriculum, but that master teacher is bringing so much content and information that goes beyond curriculum that I can teach it, I can enhance it at the same time and make it real, make it culturally affirming, make it culturally relevant, make it culturally responsive, so that the youngsters see themselves in the learning. That's what that master teacher does. See, that other teacher just is curriculum. Oh God, just teach curriculum. You know, regardless of the racial, ethnic, cultural composition of the youngsters who are in the classroom. It matters. Good stuff. We got one more. Lead for an inclusive community. What are you saying to us?
Yeah. So in the beginning, principle, when I talk about, self-reflection and awareness, that's very much around the individual leader or a leadership team, understanding that racial diversity is important. Doing the work of interrogating our biases. And that's wonderful. And if, as an educator of color, I experience harm from my colleagues or from parents or community members, like, that's not right. That's not showing me that I'm seen and valued in a space. And we have so many educators of color that are experiencing these forms of harm, right? Parents saying, I don't want my kid in that person's class, right? Things of that nature. And so what I encourage in this last principle is, how is a leader creating, actually maybe a better word is fostering, culturally affirming practices within the building to ensure that all identities are affirmed and welcomed. What does that look like? That looks like doing equity PD, culturally responsive PD. That also looks like having, to your point earlier, like some safer spaces, those affinity groups, right? For educators of color. Maybe you don't have enough just in your building, but you're doing it across the district. Or maybe you don't have any in your district. Partner with someone who is doing this work nationally. There's also a lot of organizations you can partner with. How are you, again, connecting people with resources to ensure that we are all doing the work of interrogating our biases and making sure that we're all speaking this language of cultural affirmation?
I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Doc, I'm thinking about, as you mentioned the word equity. There's a sermon I preach everywhere I go, and I probably preached it when I saw you. We were at Bowie State, by the way, where I have to seek permission. No, let me put air quotes. I have to seek, quote unquote, permission to use the word equity in many different places in America. Let's say that with the work you do and the significance that equity means to your work, but now you're in one of those places, they invited you in for whatever the reason, but they want to put a handcuff on you and say to you, but please don't reference equity in your presentation or your training. What's your response? Have you had that before?
I mean, so even living in an urban hub doing racial equity work, I still get resistance.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, like, I think I've come to a place in my life where I don't always Like I'm going to say what I'm going to say. I'm going to speak truth to power. That said, I also recognize various elements of privilege that I have that allow me to do that. So I want to pause there because I understand I might be in a different place. But if I'm in that district, what I'm going to understand is that the work has to get done. And I want to be able to be in that space to advocate for that change. And so if I need to frame this conversation around racial equity work in what's best for students, let's look at those student outcomes. Let's look at the disaggregated student outcomes. Let's look at disaggregated kind of data around the educated workforce, or even just broadly looking at teacher perception surveys, right? There's ways that we can still frame this important conversation around the data and what they're probably bringing me in for, which is to improve that data. So again, racial equity work can still happen without explicitly calling it out. And I think there's, again, Jarvis Given speaks about that in terms of that fugitive pedagogy, right? There's ways that we can be fugitive and subversive in this work. But at the end of the day, we can still speak the language of the people in that space and framing it in the best interests, again, of our students. And maybe it's even the dollars and cents, right? The reality that it's costly to have teacher turnover. So what's our plan? And how can we look at some of that disaggregated data or even that staff perception data to figure out what's going wrong and how we can fix it?
Yeah, I'm with it. You know, that language of Jarvis Givens, fugitive. Matter of fact, let me even put it on the screen here.
Amazing book. Folks need to get it. If you have, I mean, my copy's right behind me. So
I gotta reach out to him at some point and get him on here too. But fugitive pedagogy. But you know, so I tend to do this as in my mind. I probably shouldn't be saying this publicly, but I go to Underground Railroad approach. So I can talk equity without using the word equity. And it makes so much sense to my audience, and they don't realize what they were applauding me for. It's not that I'm trying to be deceptive. It's just that I know that that politically they've been, as Malcolm would say, hoodwinked, and they don't know what this thing is that they don't want in their districts and schools, right? But to me, equity, and I know that equity has a zillion different definitions. I'm clear on that. But I know that equity translates into great teaching. For me, you know, I defined it. You've heard me say it before: meeting young people where they are as they are. So now, and what I did was, and as we do in math, I reduced it to its lowest common denominator. So now, as we look at the data of that school, the data of that district, and the data says, and I'll just throw out this week because of stay consistent with the line I've been on all day. Black boys are underperforming, or black boys are disproportionately suspended, right? Or Latino girls are have lower attendance. Now, meeting young people where they are as they are. Okay, the data says I'm not meeting black boys where they are. The data says I'm not meeting Latina girls where they are. So now I understand that I need to move differently, but still staying true to the definition that I gave, meeting them where they are. So if I'm underperforming, then don't meet me up here. I'm not there. That's where we want me to be, figuratively speaking. But right now I'm down here. So come down here with me and meet me here, and then let's build. Right. So, but you got schools that are so misled that word equity spoofs them. So now here I'm sitting on the Zoom call on this computer, and then Kafele, like, please don't say equity. Why not? Because we'll have to do damage control when you leave, internally and externally. But why? Tell me what equity is, superintendent or assistant superintendent or principal, whoever I'm talking to. And typically they don't have a response for it. That's the irony to the whole thing. Like, what is it to you? Well, yeah, oh, you don't know, do you? So you don't want me to bring something you don't know what it is. So, well, let me tell you what it is from my vantage point so that I can bring it. I just want to know, I just want to ensure that your teachers and yourselves are meeting your students right there where they are as they are. That means that they're diverse, they're not the same, and you got to be inclusive of each of the youngsters. Though that DEI that you're so afraid of as you see, is so necessary, right? And they like, oh, all right, let's go. So that's how we make it happen. So yeah. So I tell you what, I think that within the 6 principles and the rest of the conversation, we covered the bullet points, right? The talking points, I mean. So we don't have to even go into those. Let me, if there's anybody, now I was gonna say if there's anybody taking pictures of the screen, but we covered everything, y'all. So let's go right to the BAM impact questions. And these are 21 questions, one word answer or a sentence. But if you find yourself inserting a comma, it's too much. I'm gonna say right. So here we go. Is education on the right path for underserved children in America?
You just came out with
I know. That's your answer, huh?
no.
Yeah. The way your facial expression was a new way to answer that question. No. Are you optimistic about the educational prospects for the masses of Black and brown students in America today?
Yes.
Can true equity occur in America's schools for Black, brown, and other underserved students? And the key is, can it?
It can, depending on who is calling the shots.
Ooh. Does Dr. Andrea Terrero Gabbadon's work contribute to the progress we desperately need?
Yes.
If you could do a reset on your life, would your line of work be different or the same?
The same.
Why do you continue to do this work?
Because our Black babies and other babies of color deserve spaces that acknowledge their genius.
What fires you up particularly within the work that you do?
Our babies.
What do you absolutely love about this work?
Seeing educators live out their why in such ways that are contagious to students, families, and community members.
What do you dislike about the work you do?
Intersectional oppression.
What has been your greatest victory in this work thus far?
Working with teachers and seeing them persist in the field.
What has been your greatest mistake in this work thus far?
Not interrogating my own biases much earlier in my career.
What has been your greatest challenge in this work?
Not finding my co-conspirators and leaning on them during times of difficulty.
Who inspires you in your work?
My babies.
What are you reading right now? It could be a book, but it could be an article, journal, blog, tweet, anything.
The Four Pivots by Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves by Sean A. Ginwright.
What book would you recommend for our viewers this afternoon?
Support and Retain Educators of Color. Mine, I also think, I recently read Decentering Whiteness in the Workplace. That was an excellent read. The author of that one is Janice Gassimasare. And one more, if you'll let me, The Anti-Racist School Leader by my good friend, Dr. Damon Harris. Amazingly practical.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you want to accomplish that you haven't accomplished yet?
I want to see the majority of the educator workforce in my home city look like the babies that we serve. And I want to see 90% of folks retained from year to year to year.
Are you satisfied with where you are professionally?
No.
What could you say to a viewer out there who continues to face closed doors?
Your work is not in vain. We
What,
see you and we value you. Your work is not in vain.
what could you say to a viewer out there who's lost their fire?
Do what you need to do to be well.
And lastly, if Dr. Andrea Terrero Gabbadon was a word in a dictionary, what would be your definition?
A resilient woman who loves God and people.
Love it. Love it. Folks, let us know. Give us that applause now. Those of you who are new to the platform, we just use our favorite emojis and fill it up with the emoji or your favorite emojis. And me, I take out my emoji, which is my Louisville Slugger that I got from Jefferson County in Kentucky. And you hit the grand slam every time you came to bat. Every time you came to bat, there were 3 people on base, and you brought them home. Grand slam. So great job. I see those emojis coming. I see it. I see it. I see it. Warley Williams, I see ya. Right. I see it. I see it. I see it. Yeah. Keep them coming. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. I should have said, I didn't say it the way I normally say it. If the session, if it resonated with you, if it inspired you, if it informed you, if it got you looking at things differently, if it prepared you that much more, then hit us with the emojis, and that's what you're doing. So I appreciate you. Keep them coming. I see you, Joe Griffin. I'm looking forward to when you're on this platform. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. And other than that, let me go back to you, Doc. How do these folks? And first, thank you. But I'll get that in a minute. How do the folks get in touch with you? How do they book you? How do they get your book? How do they follow you on social media?
Yes. So definitely, I'm super active on LinkedIn. Look for my name in the search box and you'll find me there. You can also go to atgabbadon.com. You'll see a full list of my services. You can book me directly there. Again, available for leadership consulting, equity audits, professional development, as well as keynotes. So I'm looking forward to working with folks. Again, we're in this fight together. And however I can support and affirm folks in their fight in their respective space, let's do this. I'm excited.
I love it. I love it. And once again, folks, here is the book. Support and Retain Educators of Color, 6 Principles for Culturally Affirming Leadership. You can get that at Amazon right now. You can go to ascd.org, ASCD, barnesandnoble.com. It's there, right? Get yourself a copy. Let's take it to number 1 on Amazon in the categories that it's listed. Do you know the categories offhand that you have it in?
Ed leadership.
Oh, you got it in leadership. Okay, so right there in that leadership with me, right? Take it to number 1, y'all. Any closing thoughts?
No, just I want to go back to what you said about creating that safer space for leaders. When you figure it out, whether it's a Voxer, a GroupMe, whether it's Zoom, count me in. It's so necessary. And so however I can support that work, you let me know.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, folks, as always, I appreciate you being here. And I hope everybody's happy that I took us back to Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn in addition to YouTube. I saw a lot of people, man, they jumped right back to their regular platform. Yolanda McKinney said, no, I'm staying on YouTube, right? But the rest of y'all, I see you jump back. So that's all good, man. We're gonna keep it this way. I want you all comfortable in the platforms that you enjoy most. So that's what we're doing. I'm not on Instagram only because Instagram has multiple steps in order to connect, and I just don't have the patience for those multiple steps that you got to do before you go live. So when they get it where I can just press a button like the others, then we'll be on Instagram as well. I'm sure they're gonna work on it. Stay with me, and when I go off camera, Doc, stay there. Hey, y'all, next week. Join me for week number 225. I'm bringing the Fantastic Four together. That means I'm going to have Sean Hurt, Dr. Sheikah Houston, Dr. Tammy Taylor, Josh Tovar, and Dr. Morena will all be together. We're going to talk about back to school, but we're not, we're going to talk about a lot of things as it relates to back to school, inclusive of our mental and emotional preparation, so and physical. So just tune in. We're gonna have a good talk, bringing the crew, the Fantastic Four, back together for, I think it'll be the 4th time we've done this. I'm not sure. So, but other than that, watch Sean Hurt every Saturday at 10 o'clock on Facebook Live. Create and Educate with Dr. Sheikah Houston, Tammy Taylor at 10:30 Facebook Live. These are all Facebook Live. Myself at 10:55 Facebook Live, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And then Josh Tovar Sunday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time on Facebook Live with PDP Podcast. Real quick, go to Amazon while you're getting Dr. Gabbadon's. No, that's not right. Gabbadon. See, I got my student in my head, man. As you're getting, I ain't gonna tell them that. As you're getting Dr. Gabbadon's book, if you don't have his My School, a Better School, because I lead it, get that with it. Get the Principal 50 with it. Get the Aspiring Principal 50 with it. These all coincide with the platform. Get the Assistant Principal Identity with it, and get the Assistant Principal 50 with it. And then while you're there, get them teacher books I wrote too, right? I'm not going to put those on the screen right now. Make sure you subscribe to the AP and New Principals Academy YouTube channel. Even if you're not going to watch it from there, just subscribe to it. And that way, you can watch the videos, and you'll also get notifications if you hit the notification bell. We're at 22,400 subscribers, so I am not complaining. That I feel blessed, right? That's a whole lot of people. 22,400. We've been getting almost about 100 a week as of late, and that's not a bad thing. So keep on subscribing, folks, and also like and follow the AP and New Principals Academy Facebook page. I'll be back active with that in September, because I won't be in 5 states a week starting in September, so that I'll be able to write my commentary every Sunday morning again. So every Sunday morning, I'll have the commentary ready by 10 o'clock beginning in September to coincide. So the Saturday Academy, the AP and New Principals Academy is not just Saturday. It's the Saturday Academy, and then it's the Sunday commentary. So it's a weekend. And then almost lastly, make sure you visit principalkafele.com. You can get all my materials there, my books and so forth, but you also can watch the videos and read the blogs and all that. And then lastly, your diet. I didn't have a good week with my diet. I didn't eat bad. I just didn't eat, right? So make sure you're taking care of yourself in that regard. Your exercise, get that in. I didn't get it in this week. I don't have a hard time telling you that either. I did not get it in. I'm getting in the hotels like 12 and 1 o'clock in the morning. Getting to bed like 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. That's the sleep deprivation. But guess what? In about 15 minutes, I'll be out there doing 3 miles. And then I'm going to come back in here and watch that USA basketball game against France. That's going to be an interesting game. Those of you that know basketball, then you know that Victor Wembanyama is on that French team. So it's going to be very interesting to see that whole dynamic. So I can't wait for that game. And then your virus precautions, make sure you're taking precautions. It looks like it's time for me to start rocking that mask again on the airplanes. I had taken it off, but it looks like it's time for me to put it back on. I see you, Dr. Erica Johnson Allen. Good to see you. Good to see you. I never saw you here. Right, but maybe you here and you just don't log, you just don't put in, you don't comment in the comment. But good to see you. Looking forward to joining you in Vegas in September. Other than that, folks, appreciate you being here. We got our numbers back up. Have a great week. Have an extraordinary week. Have your best week yet. Peace. Peace. Thumbs up. Cock that fist back. Count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Bam! I'll see y'all next week, but make sure it's a good week, y'all. And we'll be back stronger than ever next Saturday morning at 10:55.